And you are now live.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks for being here or wherever we are. I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask that the members of the committee turn their cameras on for one moment, please. That's a requirement as we check quorum. Okay, thank you.
I'm back. I'm not quite so foggy.
You're back.
Yeah, a little hazy.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
David is a little hazy too. We're sitting in fog.
Okay. We have regrets from Luke Stock. I'd also like to note that the HRM is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people, and the municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. Item number 2 is our approval of minutes from the May 24th meeting that we had. Are there any errors or omissions anyone has noted? None so being, I'm calling for a motion to approve the minutes, please.
I will so move.
Okay, Lois, thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. All in favor of approving the minutes of the 24th of last month?
Aye.
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 Any nays? Motion carried. Thank you. Approval of the order of business, approval of additions and deletions. Just checking, are there any additions or deletions? Checking with our legislative assistant. I have none listed here, so we're good. Is there any member who would like to move items? Okay, then we will need a motion for order of business, please.
Aye. Azuka.
Okay, thank you. And any opposed? Thank you. That motion is carried. Business arising on the minutes. There's nothing on my listing here. We'll call for the declaration of conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest to declare for today's agenda? Oh, none so being, we can move on.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I believe you're muted.
Sorry, I hit that again. Sorry about that. Oh, I'm so sorry. I did that twice today. Okay, just checking with the legislative assistant if there has been any correspondence.
Yes, Chair, there was correspondence received for agenda item 911, which was circulated to the committee members.
Everyone has received that? Should be okay with that. We don't have any petitions listed. Are there any presentations that need to come forward at this time?
No petitions, but we do have a presentation coming forward today.
So at this time, I will invite the representatives of Starfish Development to begin their presentation if they're ready.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eugene Puzanka. I'm a principal with Wyden Lynch Architects here in Halifax. And I'm here with my client, Louis Resnick, who's joining us from Toronto. And we're here to discuss the Black Binney site in the Heritage District. I'd like to share my screen with everyone and make a brief presentation. Just bear with me for a moment. I'm hoping everyone can see that.
Yes.
Okay, guys,
Yes, we
thank you.
can, yeah.
Yes,
can.
we can
Great.
see it.
I
Thank you very
can.
much. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the Black Binney House. It was originally constructed in 1819 for Mr. John Black, classic Georgian style, and is kind of represented by kind of its simple granite facade, arrangement of windows and dormers, and also by its gracious forecourt along Hollis Street. As I'm sure you're all aware, it's neatly tucked into its site and bounded by the Bell Alliant Tower, St. Matthew's Church, and the rear gardens of the Lieutenant Governor's residence. It's also worth noting that the Black Binney, which is represented at the top of this plan, is not within a view plane, as one might expect, because it's kind of within the shadow of the Bell Alliant Tower. So why are we here today in front of the committee? Well, we're hoping that we can receive some special consideration for the Black Binney site to take into account some of its unique characteristics that we believe truly make it distinguishable from the rest of the properties within the Heritage District. And I'd like to kind of take you through that. So if we look at the site here, which is highlighted in red, and again, you can see the Bell Alliant Tower to the right, the St. Matthew's Church at the top, and the Lieutenant Governor's residence to the left. We have a site of approximately 15,500 square feet. So it's a modest property. It's 150 feet deep, 105 feet wide. Once we take into account that the intention is to preserve the entirety of the Black Binney residence and its forecourt, that 150-foot depth gets reduced to 80 feet in terms of what area of the property is remaining onto which we can build. So further to that, if we incorporate 10-foot setbacks around all four sides of what might be an addition so that we can allow for roof transitions between the new addition and the existing roof, and also setbacks against the adjoining properties so that we can accommodate windows, balconies, et cetera, as well as some construction logistics, that 15,500 square feet is suddenly reduced to about 5,500 square feet for what's left over for actual additions. So we're left with about 1/3 of the site. The good part of that is that it leaves us about a 60-foot buffer between what might be the addition and the rear of the St. Matthew's Church, and also about 60 feet kitty corner to the Lieutenant Governor's residence. We end up with some quite generous buffers. In addition to kind of the restrictions of how much site is remaining, to compound that, we also are flanked by some high walls on the adjoining property. So for example, the podium of the Maritime Center is approximately 4 stories high right along our property. The rear of the church, again, is about 4 stories high immediately along our property. And then there's a lovely stone retaining wall separating the rear gardens of the Lieutenant Governor's house. So we have this sort of 4-foot hole that we have to build our way out of before we can have any floors that will have access to windows and be able to actually have occupancy. So it's really only at the 5th story that we will have any actual usable floors. So when we think about this from a massing point of view, and please note that this concept design was done 5 years ago and is really mostly intended as a test fit on the site to see how a building might be accommodated on it. But what it represents from a massing point of view is how much the building actually occupies on the property, and its context again is very unique within the district. We are at the heel of the Bell Alliant Tower. and again, generously set back from the other heritage buildings. But coming back to that kind of 4-story hole that we're in, which really aligns with almost the top of the Blackpenny residence itself. Those first 4 stories, if we're limited to a FAR of 4, is going to use up half of our allowable FAR. So really, those first 4 stories, which really can only be used primarily for things like parking garages and building services, are using up half of our FAR. So that remaining FAR of 2 only represents about 31,000 square feet of building, which on a site with only about 5,500 square feet of floor area per floor might give us another 5 stories above that 4-story limit. And with only probably 4 units per floor, because they're small floors, that only amounts to about 20 residential units. So very quickly, the site becomes economically unviable. This would never proceed in any way, shape, or form, while also factoring into the premium for construction costs because of the constraints of the site and the complications that arise from a site to be able to build on a site like this. So this is why we're representing a taller building at approximately 22 stories, because in order to make it viable, we need more height, which ultimately requires more FAR. So when we just look at this quickly in 3 dimensions from other views, again, you can kind of see how we're modestly within the shadow of the Bell Alliance building, but you can also see in this image how we're quite generously set back from the rear of the church and the side of the Lieutenant Governor's residence. So contextually speaking, we feel that this is actually a very modest proposal. And again, you can see how we almost end up as a bit of a transition between the Bell Alliance building and the remainder of the district. And then finally, kind of thinking about the pedestrian view, and what we hear from heritage experts is that really, it's that first 4 stories that represent the pedestrian experience. And when we think about that, and because we very much want to preserve the 3-dimensional presence of the Blackpenny residence, and because we're entirely set back behind the full depth of the house, the tower in behind it really doesn't become part of the pedestrian experience. It really becomes unnoticeable in a way. And really what these heritage experts tell us is that, regardless of whether what's in behind it is 8 stories or 9 stories or 11 stories or 22 stories, it really becomes an imperceptible experience for the average pedestrian. And then, of course, that then affords us the opportunity to invest in the preservation and restoration of the house and its forecourt, and do some meaningful new additions that are also of equal quality, but in a more modern way, interpret some of the characteristics of the Blackpenny house. So with that, I'd like to stop sharing my screen, and I'd like to give Louis an opportunity for some closing remarks. Thank you so much.
Hello, am I on?
Yes, you are.
Oh, okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, greetings to all, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to speak. So I want to thank the committee and planning staff for allowing us to do so. This was all on short notice, and I want to thank Eugene for putting together a little presentation quickly as well. I guess I'd like to start just by giving you a brief history. I don't know if you've had adequate time to read what we've provided to you, but there is some good information in there. Blackpenny was built in 1819. When we purchased it in 2014, it was part of the Downtown District Association. Downtown District for development, for building and zoning. Under that designation, it was not restricted in height other than the 22-story maximum. As well, in the new district and in the old downtown plan, it had no restrictions under the Citadel View planes because it's not in them. And that remains the case today. I don't want to just talk about height. I hope the way that Eugene explained it, he articulated well enough to explain that under the new plan, there is no limit for height other than by the calculations from the floor area allowable. There were no other development sites in this new district that could have risen beyond the floor area calculation of 4 because they had other restrictions such as view planes and whatever. Our site was the only one that was encumbered this way. Unfortunately, the new plan calls for painting the whole district with one brushstroke. Our building is not a usable building as is. In 2017, I believe, I sent you the information, commissionaires who had been on the property for 50 years had to leave. The site is not accessible. The heritage features, actually the dominant one of the most dominant heritage features are the staircase in front of the building and makes the building inaccessible. And there's too much work that would have to be done just to get into the building, let alone once you're in the building, there's a warren of staircases. Over the 50 years, the commissionaires had expanded the building as much as they could to provide for their own uses. The whole lot is paved. There's no landscaping because they had all these cars coming and going. All of that is what we hope to be able to bring back. The main defining feature for Black Benny being called being awarded a historic status was that it was one of the finest Halifax residents. That's the main contributing factor. And we want to turn that back into what it should have been by providing us an additional floor. Oh, and the other thing is too, sorry, the drawings that you were just looking at that Eugene provided, they were done 5 and 6 years ago. They were brought today just to give you an illustration of what a tower would look like, the massing of it and how it would sit on the site. That's by no means what we would build today. Things have changed. Unit sizes have changed. The market has changed. The downtown has changed. So under the new plan, we would follow it. We would work with urban planning staff. We would work with planning staff, heritage staff to create a welcoming building. Not that that one wasn't beautiful. We thought it was great. But again, that was 5, 6 years ago. So there would be new plans. So what we're asking for you today in consideration is to consider is not that building or a building. We're just asking, well, I'm going to tell you what the ask is in a second, but we're asking just that you provide us, not just us, but the owner and the whoever owns Black Benny, whoever resides there, the ability to work within a zoning and be able to utilize everything that exists in the downtown. The infrastructure is there, the pedestrians are there, the marketplace is there, community services are there. The need is there for all of those things, for housing and for different kinds of housing, seniors housing and student housing, let alone affordability. We're lucky or fortunate that our neighbor, St. Matthew's Church, they have a foresight. They'd like to do something to create a legacy in their building, to do something for the community. We'll be able to work with them to create that. We'll be able to work with them to create a landscaped area where you could walk from Spring Garden across Barrington Street down through their property and our property down to Hollis Street in a landscape setting, you know, with the beautiful heritage walls, with the Lieutenant Governor's treed lot towards Hollis Street. All of that would be allowed if we could do something not restricted by the FAR. Anyways, I don't want to speak too much. I just want to see if I missed any points before I ask you for what it is I want to ask. We are in full support of the district plans. We only ask, there's a map in C3 of the policy or of the district plan that shows a map, and it says that map is an FAR ratio of 4. If you would just recommend, if you are going to recommend approval of the plan, I don't know what other points you may have or might be considering, but insofar as the FAR calculation, we only ask that you ask planning staff and heritage staff to review the FAR calculation on our specific site. I mean, I can tell you what we would like to see on there. We'd like to see what we had before, which was the 22-story height. I'm not saying we would build 22 stories, but that's what we had, that's what we were entitled to, and that's what this plan takes away. Having said that, if 22 stories doesn't seem appropriate, we would work together with planning staff and heritage staff to create something. But as the plan sits today, it won't allow us any flexibility. So we only ask that you ask them to reconsider or to single us out on that. Just what takes a little circle around our property and just say, please reconsider this before it goes to council. Now, on that note, I believe I'm going to be correct in what I'm saying, but I mean, Seamus and planning staff can let you know if I'm incorrect. My understanding is if you were to do so, and if planning staff and heritage staff were to do that before it goes to council for first reading, it will not hold back the date or timing of the approval or the process. If, for argument's sake, you don't do that or won't consider doing that, sorry if I'm not phrasing it properly, and we ask council to do it later and council were to do it, then it would set it back. It would have to be re-advertised and whatever. So this is a window that by doing what we're asking you to do, you'll enable us to get a second chance. You'll enable, I think, everybody to have a look at it. And we're only talking in the next couple of weeks because I believe this is going to go to council in the next short while. So we're not asking for anything stringent. We're not asking for anything excessive, but it's something that will help us do what we have done very well and will try and continue to do, which is to preserve the heritage building, do a good job at it, and build something for the community that'll make us all proud. The other thing is too, I just have to say, when you walk down Hollis Street and you get to that block, it's like a dead zone. We're the backyard of everything. You know, we're the backyard shipping area of the Maritime Center. You can't see the Governor General's house because of the wall. You know, in the summer, it's great. You see the foliage hanging over the wall, but in the winter, you see nothing other than the wall and the Maritime Center. And we want to open up the Black Binney House. We will provide such a great example of what you can do for heritage. And the last thing I just have to say, we've included in the package to you their accolades are well known. 2 of the largest heritage architect firms in Canada. One is ERA, and I provided an older impact study that they did for the site, which says the same thing. Height doesn't matter. You can preserve the heritage building and all of those things, and without, you got to do the height properly, of course, and I'm sorry, I'm paraphrasing. And we found a Halifax one of the most senior accredited guys in Canada, CBCA. Your heritage staff knows them well. He was trying to be at the meeting today, just couldn't make it, but he did draft a letter, which I received only yesterday. So I sent it to Seamus, and it's in Seamus' file, and he confirms what I just said about the height. So it's not just me asking you to do this, it's something that's done all over Canada, all over the world, never mind, and especially with church buildings, it's just a fantastic opportunity to do something special, which we will not be able to do with a FAR of 4. It's just impossible on this particular site. So I hope I've been able to articulate what we're asking for well enough. If you have any questions, please, I'm here, and Eugene, I think Eugene is still there, and go for there. So thank you very, very much.
Sorry,
I don't
Chair,
hear-
you are on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot. Thank you for that presentation. Are there any questions from committee members? Well, I do have one. You talk about bringing the original Black Betty back to life. What possible usages do you see for that original building?
Sorry, I'm not so quick on the computer. Am I back
Neither
on
was I,
again?
don't feel bad.
Okay, thank you. It will become a residence. It will be exactly what it was meant to be. As it's a point I didn't want to dwell on. In the ensuing time, since it's the only real thing it can be used for, which is a residence, what it was and what it's meant to be. In the ensuing years since commissioners left, we've had it for lease for both residential use and commercial use. The only opportunities we have had so far is a rental truck lot, which they're dying to have, or a fast food because they can do a drive-through around the building. And we have hesitated to do that. So we will put it back in Eugene's old plan 5 years ago. It was shown as the lobby, and then you go upstairs and it would have been apartments above it. So it would have been it will be restored to a residence, but again, with accessibility from the rear tower, there would be an elevator and all the amenities and services it would require. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Doesn't look like there's any. Thanks for the presentation. We will be in touch after some
Just one question, Ryan. One question,
Oh,
Ryan.
sorry.
Could we have staff make a comment on this, or do we just refer this to staff for a further supplementary report? Because if there's a report coming ahead for us on the heritage districts, do we require an amendment or special planning permit or something here? I'd just like to know what the process here from this presentation on. So maybe Seamus or Kirk can alert us. Where does this request go to now?
Yeah.
Hi, Seamus McGrail, Senior Heritage Planner with the Heritage Property Program. Mr. Chair, would it be more appropriate for me to answer questions now or after the staff presentation?
Let's do them now, then we'll go forward. Because your presentation is coming up next, unless you feel you can do both.
Sure. A lot of the questions will be answered throughout the course of the presentation. So it's something, if there are specific questions, I would prefer to give that context of the district plan. It may answer a lot of the questions, and then afterwards we can take specific questions perhaps.
No problem. We'll do it that way.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, so our next item will be Seamus's presentation report from staff, Downtown Heritage Conservation District Plan bylaw and amendments. And Seamus, I'll give it to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to share my screen. Mr. Chair, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Actually, make sure I have the right screen shared here. But again, okay, thanks again, Mr. Chair, committee, guests. Once again, my name is, I continue to be Seamus McGrail, Senior Heritage Planner of the Heritage Property Program. This is a case to consider a new Heritage Conservation District in downtown Halifax, and it's aptly called the Downtown Halifax Heritage Conservation District. So the origins of this case date back to a decision of Regional Council in May 4th, 2021, where Regional Council accepted background studies to initiate a planning process to establish a new Heritage Conservation District. At that time, Council also adopted a public participation program to instruct staff on how to proceed with public engagement around the new Heritage District. So a Heritage Conservation District is a defined area of historic or architectural value. It's protected by regulations governing such things as demolition, exterior alteration, and providing guidelines for new development. It also has measures for financial incentives, which may apply to encourage private architectural conservation and programs that may enhance public amenities. Downtown Halifax currently has 3 Heritage Conservation Districts established, and you see them here on the screen. Barrington Street was established in 2009. Schmidtville was established in 2018, and our latest Heritage Conservation District, which we were discussing just now, is the Old South Suburb, and this was adopted only in 2020, so only a few years ago. So since its adoption, the Downtown Halifax Municipal Planning Strategy has maintained a policy to prepare a background study that will consider the historic properties in Granville Mall areas as potential heritage conservation districts. So this idea of creating a new heritage district in the areas of Granville Mall and historic properties has been around for quite some time, and it's well supported in policies of the Downtown Halifax plan. In fact, there's a specific policy stating that calling for the creation of this heritage district. In 2019, Regional Council passed a motion to initiate this background study and to consider expanding the geographic scope of the area of historic properties in Granville Mall to extend it further south to include the 50+ registered heritage properties around Province House Square. And so showing here. So this in green, you see what we're referring to as the new capital area. This is the area that is proposed to be included within a new heritage conservation district. But what we're also seeking to do is combine the existing Barrington Street Heritage Conservation District and the existing Old South Suburb Heritage Conservation District into one new plan, which will be called the Downtown Halifax Heritage Conservation District. So there'll be a consolidation of planning measures and heritage measures to establish consistency and a consistent approach in the administration. We'll also be repealing the existing Barrington Street HCD and the existing Old South Suburb HCD to reduce the number of bylaws that the municipality has to administer. So it's a bit of cutting red tape in a way by consolidating these documents and creating one new framework for the entirety of downtown Halifax to include these 3 separate areas and roll them into one new plan. So there's a great deal of development pressure in downtown Halifax. Downtown Halifax is experiencing some of the fastest growth in the country. The real estate is some of the most valuable real estate in Nova Scotia. This is propelled by the Cogswell redevelopment project currently happening. There's a lot of development proposed for the Cogswell site once it's ready for development, and this will spur development in downtown Halifax. And so we have to prepare ourselves for that kind of change. There's also been since 2009, there's been a loss of many heritage buildings. So a benchmark study was done in 2009, which identified about 100 future heritage buildings that could be registered as heritage. And since 2009, over half of these buildings, about over 50, have been lost to demolition. So this is it's an important time now to protect the remaining unregistered heritage properties in downtown Halifax through the designation of a heritage conservation district. So looking at the proposed boundaries of the Heritage Conservation District, you see them here, 3 distinct areas: the Capital area, Barrington Street area, and Old South Suburb area. And the boundaries will encompass these three areas. The rationale for establishing a Heritage Conservation District is with the heritage value of these areas. These areas are historically significant and architecturally significant. The other rationale is a heritage district can help respond to development pressure and loss of character. It can establish consistency in the administration of these documents and establish guidelines for appropriate new development, and reduce the number of plans and bylaws that staff administer. It's also these areas were brought in at separate times. So Barrington Street was adopted in 2009, and the Old South Suburb was adopted in 2020. So there's some differences in policy and approaches, and we want to take the best of what's working well in Barrington Street and apply it around to the Capital area and Old South Suburb, and we want to do the same thing, what's working best in Old South Suburb. So it's a way to kind of establish consistency throughout the administration of these 3 areas. So the new consolidated HCD plan will promote the distinct heritage values and character of these 3 historic areas of downtown. And it will better align with the directions of the new center plan as well. Just talking briefly about the heritage value of these 3 separate areas. So the Capital area is the original town of Halifax. It became the seat of provincial and municipal governments and an important center of commerce and waterfront industry. So this is arguably the oldest colonial settlement in the Halifax regional municipality. It's the original town established between the harbor and Citadel Hill, and a very, very significant area. The Barrington Street area is the principal arterial street, which became the main commercial street in the late 19th century. And the Old South Suburb was the first suburb of Halifax, and is recognized for its important Georgian and Victorian residential architecture. In terms of the process, as mentioned, the process was initiated with the adoption of a background study. This is a legal document that council approved. It was also reviewed by the minister and approved by the minister in May 4th, 2021, which initiated the process to establish this heritage district. The planning and community engagement phase included 2 public meetings in 2021 and in 2022, and many workshops and meetings with stakeholders, including the development community, businesses, and concerned citizens. And the completion of that phase of the project is June of this year. And we are now in the review and adoption phase, which begins with this presentation and a recommendation by Heritage Advisory Committee. The documents, this is the only committee that the documents will proceed to. And after HAC makes a recommendation today, it will proceed to council for first reading and a public hearing. And the estimated completion date is August, September of this year. So the Heritage Conservation District Plan includes 3 main goals. The first goal is to conserve the historic integrity of downtown Halifax within a sustainable urban environment. The second goal is to encourage new development that complements the scale and character of downtown Halifax. So this plan really does recognize that there is development pressure in downtown Halifax, and it seeks to develop the appropriate heritage conservation, heritage design guidelines, and land use bylaw provisions to ensure that that development happens in an appropriate way. It also seeks to promote the downtown Halifax Heritage Conservation District as a cultural heritage destination. So people recognize that it's a heritage town, but we want to kind of promote that with streetscape elements, with new interpretive signage, and other public realm improvements that really showcase it as a place for visitors and residents to appreciate the heritage of their community. So in terms of some of the objectives and policies that implement these goals, I'll go through the different documents that are proposed for adoption today. The first document is the Heritage Conservation District Plan itself and its associated bylaw. So what these documents do is they identify contributing heritage resources. So these are similar to registered heritage properties, but they're protected under the policies and bylaws of the plan itself, not the legislation, not the act per se. So the plan does identify buildings and open spaces as contributing heritage resources. Any substantial alteration to these contributing heritage resources will require heritage officer approval only. So this is a change that we're making to the existing Old South Suburb and Barrington Street HCDs, where if a change is to a contributing heritage resource, it would have required regional council approval. We're making a change in policy now that the heritage officer can review and make changes to substantial alterations to contributing heritage resources. Registered heritage properties will remain registered and will still require regional council approval for substantial alterations. The changes only apply to contributing heritage resources. Of course, demolition of contributing heritage resources will still require regional council approval or a refusal of the demolition by regional council. Section 18, if you're familiar with Section 18 of the Heritage Property Act, no longer applies within a heritage conservation district. So a property owner, Section 18 is where a property owner can apply for a demolition of a heritage building. And if council refuses the demolition, the applicant could wait 3 years and apply and demolish the building anyways. That provision, that limitation of the Heritage Property Act no longer applies within a designated heritage conservation district. So in a sense, that it's strengthening protection of registered heritage buildings once we draw this boundary around a district. So we're also making amendments to the regional center secondary municipal planning strategy, and some of the specific policy amendments we're proposing in the staff package is to create a downtown Halifax Heritage Conservation District precinct, which will be delineated along the boundaries of the proposed Heritage Conservation District. We're creating a new zone. The new zone will be called the Heritage Conservation District Downtown Halifax Zone. And we'll be able to make changes to that zone independent of changes to the downtown Halifax zone. So there'd be specific provisions that can apply directly to that zone. We're creating 4 special areas, all of which are within the Old South Suburb. So the first Old South Suburb redevelopment site, this is the lot south of Peace and Friendship Park, where the superstore is. This special area will be developed through development agreement. It's on a very large lot, so it will be developed through a development agreement. If their proposal is to exceed the FAR on that site. The Waverly Inn, the Elmwood, and the development of South and Tobin all have approved site plan approvals in place already. They've already secured site plan approvals. So the purpose of these sub areas within the Old South Suburb is to allow these site plan approvals to occur once the new plan is in place, so that they don't have to go through the site plan approval process a second time, or they don't have to apply for variations. They'll be able to continue with their development plans that have already been approved. The Regional Center Land Use Bylaw will also identify contributing heritage buildings, similar to the Heritage Conservation District Plan. There's a definition added to contributing heritage building and a definition added in the Land Use Bylaw for contributing heritage property as well. Maximum heights identified in the capital area will include some changes that I'll discuss a bit later. There are no changes to maximum height in the existing Barrington Street area, and there are no changes to maximum FAR for in the existing Old South Suburb area. So, but when the Old South Suburb came forward for approval in 2020, the entire area was mostly capped at 22 meters. What we actually did when we brought the Old South Suburb into adoption is we actually increased that development potential. The FAR actually allows for heights up to nine stories, so 28 meters. So we didn't reduce any height when we introduced the Heritage Conservation District in 2020. We actually increased development potential throughout the entire area with the FAR provision. The old burying grounds and Government House and St. Matthew's Church properties will be added to the Old South Suburb area. So those three properties are currently within the Barrington Street area. We'll be bringing them into the Old South Suburb area and applying the 4 FAR to those properties. And design requirements shall apply to all contributing heritage properties. So not just to registered heritage properties, but the design requirements will also apply to contributing heritage resources as well. So in terms of the Heritage Conservation District Downtown Halifax zone, there's some provisions added to that zone, which are noteworthy. And I'm just giving kind of the highlights here of the zone. So more than one main building will be permitted on a contributing heritage property. So any new development doesn't have to be attached to a heritage building. It can actually be separated from the heritage building. No side or rear setbacks from property lines will be required. And there will be a 12-meter street line setback for any height exceeding the street wall height in defined areas. So this provision already applies within the Old South Suburb area, and we're proposing to introduce this within the view corridors of the capital area. So these are shown on Schedule 20A in the package. So these black lines represent where the 12-meter setback above the historic street wall apply, which street frontages on registered heritage properties. So this essentially means that, and I'll just go to the next slide to explain what that means. Any development must be set back 12 meters before it can rise to its allotted height. So what this does in the case of this historic building here is it essentially preserves the heritage building, because you can't build on top of it. Right, you can't build on top of it right here. It has to be set back from the street wall by 12 meters, and this preserves the prominent east-west view corridors from the harbor to Citadel Hill that are so important to the character of this area, and it also maintains the building heights along these view corridors. So these are examples of approved site plan approvals on the Waverly and Elmwood sites in the Old South Suburb, where this 12-meter setback has been applied successfully. So So yeah, as you can see, any development behind the Elmwood is set back into the rear. And the same case with the Waverly Inn. These are 9 10-story structures set back 12 meters in the rear of the heritage properties. And this is the type of development we're proposing along the view corridors in the new capital area. In terms of changes to heights, so as I mentioned, we're only proposing changes to heights within the capital area. We're reducing heights on Province House Square from 22 meters to 11 meters for obvious reasons. We don't want to see tall buildings built on top of the Legislative Assembly building. It's just common sense. Elsewhere, where there are existing open spaces, we're reducing height to 4 meters so that large buildings are not constructed on unimportant open spaces, such as the Cheapside property in between the Nova Scotia Art Galleries location. And we're also proposing to increase heights strategically. So where heights can be increased, such as on these sites here, we recognize that there will be a decrease in development potential where we introduce that 12-meter setback. So we are trying to find other places where height can be added so that there's no net loss in total in developable area. We actually designed this plan to ensure that there was a net increase in development potential by ensuring that height can happen where it's not within significant heritage resources. So in terms of the process, we're finishing up the drafting of the Heritage Conservation District Plan, looking to begin the review and adoption process by presentation to Heritage Advisory Committee today. Once Heritage Advisory Committee provides a recommendation to Regional Council today, it would proceed to Regional Council and notice will be given of a public hearing. A public hearing will be held. All households, so that includes apartments, all units within the proposed downtown Halifax Heritage Conservation District will receive notice in the mail. A newspaper ad will be published at the public hearing. Regional Council will hold the public hearing and make a decision at second reading. And it's important to note that once Regional Council does make a decision, the documents are submitted for approval to both the Minister of Communities, Culture and Heritage and the Minister of Municipal Affairs. And once the Minister decides to approve these documents, then they become in effect. They come into effect only after ministerial approval. So in conclusion, I'll just mention the capital area will be the new part of the Heritage Conservation District. It's one of the most significant areas in HRM. There's no question of the heritage value of downtown Halifax and the associated with the economic, social, political evolution of Halifax, the province, and even the country, which continues to the present. The downtown Halifax secondary municipal planning strategy has long envisioned a renewed community focus for this part of the downtown, and the HCD plan and bylaw will protect the many significant registered and non-heritage buildings in this area. So you will see quite a few recommendations in the staff report. The recommendations are really divided into the first part of the recommendations. Recommendations 1 and 2 are really there to send the documents to a public hearing, and the recommendations 3 and 4 are really the same format, but we're at the staff recommending to the Heritage Advisory Committee to recommend the Halifax Regional Council adopt the document package. So these are the recommendations before you. Quite lengthy, but I will conclude my presentation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Seamus. I'm just working with my camera here. There we go. In regard to the last presentation, was there any commentary you want to make?
Yeah, as mentioned in the staff presentation, there are no changes to the built form framework, including heights and FARs within the two existing heritage conservation districts. So that's the approach that was taken by staff, was not to change. The Old South Suburb Heritage Conservation District plan was only adopted 2 years ago, so it's a relatively new plan. There was no initiative taken by staff to make any substantive changes to the heights framework or the FAR framework there, since it's a brand new document.
So it would stand. Any comments or questions from the committee?
Yes, sir, if I may.
Councillor.
If we're amalgamating these three districts, Old Suburb, Barrington Street, and New Capital into one heritage zone, if the rules in one part of those zones, i.e. the New Capital area, is allowed to have provisions for higher height opportunities, should that not apply to the other two zones that are being adapted into that? I think that a lot of the building sites we already have in Barrington and South Suburbs may have been built to their potential, but we still have one there, for instance, the Black Binney House, the old Commissioners, the Nova Scotia facility, that is making a special request here. And I think that over 2 years ago, when these plans first came in, we didn't have the situations of COVID. We didn't have the cost of materials, the lack of labor and contractors and stuff. Cost of building has gone up significantly. So therefore, to have any reasonable return on investment, the only way to go is to get that investment return is to go up in height of a building. And especially with the Black Binney House being still within the shadows of the Maritime Mall and stuff, I think it's a very reasonable request. And I think that there should be provisions that if we're allowing height opportunities in the New Capital Zone, then I think those new height opportunities should be allowed in the other undeveloped heritage sites that we have in the other two zones.
An excellent point. In order to accommodate that, what would we have to do at this stage so that that change would be made going forward?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Heritage Advisory Committee provides recommendation to Regional Council. So the Heritage Advisory Committee cannot instruct staff to make changes. So the Heritage Advisory Committee can make recommendations to Regional Council for its consideration.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So on that point, Mr. Chairman, could I make a suggestion that we make a recommendation to council? I don't have it formally written, but I'm sure our capable staff will be making sure the language is appropriate, but perhaps we should look at a possible amendment to allow new height opportunities in the Old Suburbs and Barrington Street heritage zones onto registered heritage properties that have been either underdeveloped or undeveloped to their potential presently. So I think that should give us an opportunity for those properties within those areas to look at what potentials they have in preserving their assets.
Thank you. I was going to ask this one. Are you making that as a motion?
I'd like to make that a motion, but I don't know if the clerk's office has been able to type that up or like I just.
Councillor Hensby, can you just repeat what you said again? I could probably try to.
I'd like to amend the staff recommendation that the prevention for height allowances, increased height allowances that are permitted in the capital district be extended to either underdeveloped or undeveloped heritage sites within the Old suburb, and Barrington Street precincts.
Is that complete now?
Does that make sense for staff?
Yep, just 1 second.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I see we have our senior planner, Mr. Kirk Pyle's hands up, so you might want to respond to.
Oh, sorry, just saw that. Kurt, what? Okay, Kurt, what? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My name is Kurt Pyle. I'm the manager of Culture and Heritage for HRM. In terms of what's being proposed here, the only concern I have relative to this, what council had really originally asked us to do, was to look at pulling these three areas together. The fact that we have not consulted the property owners in Old South Suburb or the surrounding area for increases in height, I would think that would be worthy. It would result in us going back out to the public again, because that would be a significant change. Because as Seamus has indicated, the FAR 4 was set and everybody agreed to that at the time. I know that the applicant that was here from Black Benny didn't agree with it, but in terms of what council agreed to, but to wide open this area, same as the capital district, the capital district area, I think is not the best way to go, because these are three distinct different areas. They have development standards that are different in each one, even though there's consistency across them. That I think that would open, we would most likely would have to go back, we would recommend to go back to council to go and redo Old South Suburb all over again for consultation, because it was nothing that that community was ever consulted on.
So this is new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another option B is to make a site-specific amendment to the plan, then to allow perhaps the Black Mini House to be exempt from the suburb, the old South Suburb zoning for this height restriction.
You could look at that option as well. Yes.
Yeah. That would be far less intrusive. Seamus?
Yes, so sorry, even with a site-specific change, we would have to, we would likely have to go back and redraft policy. It's not just a matter of changing a number on a map. We would have to rationalize the case for building increasing height on a national historic site, which abuts another national historic site. So it would be very challenging to write policy in support of increased heights on that specific site.
But with that, though, we only have a couple examples of this National Historic Site beside a National Historic Site in the downtown Halifax area. We're not riddled with them. We only have a few exceptions, and I think that I think we can probably make a case for those exceptions. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Can I add one more thing? Yes, I would just want to build on what Seamus actually just said, is that I think that Louis, when he actually did his presentation, he said he wanted one change, but unfortunately, how the policies are arranged and designed, there'll be more than one change or one amendment that we would have to do. It's something that we can do, but it's something that I think would have a better impact than opening up all of Old South Suburb for redevelopment at much higher density.
Thank you. Pam?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess my comments would just be in agreement with staff. I think that the amendment is actually out of order in this case. We're not talking about a land use bylaw amendment, right? Like, this is not something that this current motion that we're moving towards based on the staff presentation. I think that if we're going to make a recommendation to get a staff report on making significant amendments to the land use bylaw and center plan, that's a completely different project. And so I just, while I understand what you're trying to do, Councillor Hensby, I would suggest that it's actually out of order, and it isn't something that we should even be entertaining at this point. But if there is a separate motion to come forward, that would be entirely different. But this would not be. I don't see this amendment as being in order.
And what do you see, Pam, as the content of that separate motion?
Well, I think what Councillor Hensby was trying to get at is a review to ensure the consistency throughout the entire new designated area. But at the same time, that would require an awful lot of consultation with property owners, with the community, and so on and so forth, which is not what this is. So this is something entirely different as we merge these together. So, based on Kurt's comments and what Seamus had put forward, what we would be asking staff to do would be an awful lot of more work, and it would be a complete policy change and policy review, which is a different subject altogether than what it is that we're talking about right now.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I always like to take a wholesome approach to things, and I don't like doing one-of amendments and stuff. So if this request may be too comprehensive to go across the old suburb and Barrington Street districts, then we perhaps need to make a motion to make a site-specific exception.
And the site-specific exception will still require some consultation and policy change, I gather. Am I correct to that, Seamus?
Yes, Mr. Chair, you're correct.
I want to make sure. Yeah, okay.
Sorry, Kurt, you're muted, Kurt.
Sorry about that. To you, Mr. Chair, to the committee, is that yes, we would require to do a few amendments to the documents, just not one map. It would require a number of different alterations to the existing policy.
Thank you. Just to do a sidestep here, given this particular, we seem to be dealing with one property in the midst of all of this. If we go forward and make the recommendation to council continuing along the line of fire that we've been working on, what would be involved in going back to make a change for that one specific policy property? Need new hearings or?
Yeah. Yes, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. To make a site-specific change to a policy, there would be a site plan approval process for any as of right development. But to make a change to the height would require an application for a rezoning.
Okay.
It would require it would be a rezoning application.
If we did it after the fact.
Right.
To play devil's advocate, what if the province was to designate this as one of the special planning areas because it's going to be a totally residential project? Would that exempt it?
Kurt, you're on mute there.
In terms of what the province does, because we're a creature of the province, it can do whatever it wishes to do relative to that. I don't think we would want to recommend that. I think it would be something more that it's an HRM decision or approach to resolve the issue, not to require the province to step in. But again, all you were doing today would be passing on a recommendation to council. If it is a site-specific recommendation, then that's what you can, or you look at the alternative one. But if that's what's in front of the committee now.
Well, Mr. Chairman, to make it simplified, then I'll just amend my motion to make a site-specific to the Black Binney House.
Okay.
To see if they can get the same provisions in the new capital region.
Staff get that? We've abandoned the first motion. And Councillor Hensby's suggested that we have a site-specific one.
Yes, I will send that in the chat just now.
Okay, thank you. There's the motion. Thank you. Any further discussion on this motion?
I think Lois is looking to speak.
Oh, sorry, Lois.
Thank you. With this new motion, are we not setting a precedent which may have a ripple effect and cause more trouble, more challenges than we can imagine? And
You're saying from other sites.
Yes, I'm not quite sure how far I can see here, either straight ahead or on each side, but will there not be other developments and developers who will point to this precedent and say, if them, why not us? And what are the implications of that?
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
On that point, I believe that when we went to the initial consultations with Old South Suburbs and Barrington Street heritage zones, a lot of the property owners were in agreement except for particularly this property owner. He wanted more height opportunities, so he was kind of denied his wish, where everybody else was happy with the
outcome.
Outcome, yes.
We have a motion on the floor. If I could have the legislative assistant just read it once, please.
Yeah, sure. The motion is to amend the staff provision for height allowance for Black Mini be extended to allow new height opportunities for underdeveloped or undeveloped heritage properties within the Old Suburbs and Barrington Street.
Thank you. So this becomes a recommendation or request.
I would slightly amend that a bit because we want to talk site specific to the Black Benny House, so we don't need to reference the Old South Suburb or Barrington Street districts, because that would open up for the rest of the zone. We're just talking about site specific, so we don't need to reference the other two heritage districts.
Okay, I will send the amendment in the chat right now.
Okay. That's open. Amend a staff provision for height allowance for Black Bay to be extended. Okay. Kurt?
In terms of the wording, I think I changed it a little bit. I'd say amend the staff provisions for height allowance for the Black Benny property. To be reviewed. Let me just think about that. Just give me a second and let me see if I got something up here.
I kind of agree with you. I think that you've got to be a little bit more specific in the motion as far as what the height is. So if it's aligning specifically with another height, for example, and I don't think we're talking about undeveloped or undeveloped property. We're talking, I would say that the address should probably be in the motion as well.
And I believe he asked for a height of 105 feet. I think that was in the presentation.
I think so. I'm not exactly sure.
So, Mr. Chair, do we just want to take a 5-minute break or something for
I think we should. And
to,
yeah, we take a minute and get to the point that Councillor Hensby and the rest of us are clear on exactly what this motion is.
Yeah.
And we'll give them a little time to work on that.
Okay, thank you. Dorothy?
Yes, I'm here. Hello, Chair. The amended motion is in the chat. Brian, are you still there?
So this in the chat is the updated. Oh yeah, that's much better. Good job. Are we back online? We have our chair.
I'm still waiting. Hello, Brian.
Oh, okay.
I think we'll give him a couple minutes.
And should that read that the advisory committee is recommending to council that staff review?
Sorry about that. I seem to have fallen off. I think, am I back?
We can hear you.
Oh, good.
Yes, Chair, you are back.
Yeah, slipped right off for some reason.
Back on broadcasting, or
What's that?
are we broadcasting again, or we were on pause there for a moment?
It said that I just got a message that we are now recording again.
Okay, thank you. Well, Mr. Chairman, that motion we currently have in the chat, I think we need to add a couple words. The Heritage Advisory Committee is recommending to Halifax Regional Council that staff review. You know, we can't revise staff.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I just sent in the amended motion.
We see it now. Thank you.
I think we lost Brian again.
You're on mute, Brian.
Oh, I fell off again. I just totally lost it. We have the newest version. Any discussion on that from the group?
Sorry, Chair, we do need a mover and a seconder to put the motion on the floor.
Okay.
I'll move the wording. The Heritage Advisory Committee recommending the Halifax Regional Council staff review the fire provisions applied to the Black Mini property to consider additional development potential, i.e. height on the property.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder? Kurt?
Can I add one thing to it?
Sure.
Is that should read it a little bit differently. The Heritage Advisory Committee is recommending that Halifax Regional Council direct staff to review the fire provisions applied to, right?
Counselor? Is that acceptable to you?
Absolutely.
Sounds good. It makes more sense. Okay. So with that amendment, what will the motion be?
The motion would be the Halifax Advisory Committee is recommend Halifax Council direct staff for review of the fire provisions applied to the Black Penny property to consider additional development potential, i.e. height on the property.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder?
The only one more minor change to it is it should read, the Heritage Advisory Committee is recommending that the regional council direct staff to review the fire provisions applied to Black Betty.
Councilor Hensby?
That's the verb, but put it in there.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for the motion?
Okay. I, Azuka Onwoka, move the motion to second the motion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Anyone else? Those opposed? None so being, the motion is carried. Thank you. We got through that one. Now we're back to the motion. We have a large motion here. 4 parts, 2 parts each for a total of 8 recommendations. Certainly, we don't, everyone has a copy. I don't think we need to read them through at length. Any discussion on that particular motion that the Heritage Advisory Board recommend to Regional Council, and then the 8 recommendations following that? Okay, thank you. Do I have a mover for this motion? Or this series of motions?
As long as that's acceptable to the clerk and to the staff, that's all intended, the motion be read as circulated or moved as circulated.
Is that acceptable to staff?
Yep, that works.
Do them as one unit, thank you. So Councillor Hensby has made that motion. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second it, David.
Thank you, David. And all those in favor, say aye.
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 Those
Aye.
opposed? There are none so be. The motion is carried. So go forward. Number 9.2 is membership updates. We'd like to welcome Nadja Tulani to the committee. They have joined in June. We have no added items that I can see. And we have a scheduled date for next meeting of July the 26th, which I gather will be a Zoom meeting again, to the best of my knowledge.
Yes.
Do we
that
have a
will be
motion?
virtual.
Yes, sorry.
That's will be virtual.
What's that?
July meeting will be virtual.
Virtually. Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
This is Patrick. I'll move the motion.
Thank you, Patrick. And meeting adjourned, and thank you, everyone. It was a lot of work today.
Have a
Thank
good day,
you.
all.
Thank you. And
Chair
bye.
and staff.
Yes, it was a lot of work for staff.
All
600 pages.
Yeah, yeah.
I know, I was downloading some of it earlier. Well, thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank
Thank
you. Have a
you.
good
And you
evening.
too.